right? So if you see money, if you see the definition of money, it's a economic unit that functions as a generally recognized medium of exchange for transactional purposes. So money, the use of money, if you see what you are using money, so whenever you are transacting anything, you need money in the form of exchange. So if we see the evolution of the currency, you'll find that initially we were doing bartering system, right? In the when we were cavemen, then we were doing bartering system, and not only the cavemen. If you talk about the traditional societies or the agricultural societies, so the primitive societies, all those societies are basically having the bartering system, and in bartering system what they are doing nothing but exchanging the goods. For example, if uh, in the in the village somebody is producing wheat and other is producing milk, then the person who is producing wheat is exchanging it with the person who is producing the milk. But the issue is that there might be certain restrictions on the bartering system, because this person who is having wheat might use something like vegetable, and this vegetable person who is having the vegetable might not need the wheat. That means this is restriction that this person cannot exchange vegetable with the vegetable person. So this is the restriction of bartering system. Then came physical tokens. Physical tokens, the best example to understand is uh, who used I think Tughlaq. The best example to understand in history, you will find Tughlaq, who used token currencies, and which was a blunder by him. And physical tokens, if you want to understand more, the tokens used in the form of gold coins, right, silver coins, right, used in the past. Then came the concept of paper money. That means paper money means that this paper will be having the value because it is being authorized by the governments. Right? That means the paper is having the value because the government has given the power for that. Then came the concept of electronic money, that is smart cards or card money, soft money. Then the ongoing, the contemporary times talks about cryptocurrencies. So if we talk about functions of money, it is medium of exchange, um, self-explanatory. Measurement of value means it is actually acting as a unit of measurement. Unit of measurement means, if you see, if you want to give somebody 1 lakh rupees, then if you are having 1,000 rupees or 500 rupees, that means it will be using as a measurement of value. Standard of deferred payment, it means that if you want to pay the loan to somebody else, then it is accepted, the currency is accepted after a long period of time. Store of value, when storage transfer of value, that means if you are having 500 rupees and you give that to someone else, then the that 500 value will be transferred from you to another person. Contingent function, distribution of income, that means if you are distributing rupee to someone, that means you are distributing the income. Giving a general form to capital, that means it is giving a shape. For example, if you are having a house and you want to realize it in the monetary terms, then you will be giving, if you are selling it, then somebody will give you money. That means it is giving a form to that asset. Basis of credit, explanatory. Maximum satisfaction, it's a behavioral part. Liquidity function, right, when I'm saying that liquidity function, that means that cash is the most liquid, because everybody wants to exchange anything in the form of cash. Bearer of option means the person who holds that currency is having the option to use in a number of forms. Guarantor of solvency, that means if uh, you are getting insolvent, that means you are getting bankrupt. At that time, if somebody gives you cash, then it creates guarantee. If you are providing somebody cash, then you are acting as a guarantor, because cash is accepted as guarantor. This is fiat money, right? See, fiat money is why any money is fiat money. I told you, if there is a currency, it is having the value of 2000 rupees or 100 rupees because it is having the fiat of the government. It is having the fiat backing of the government. It's a guarantee of the government, right? So fiat money is nothing but the guarantee of a government as a legal tender. Legal tender means that that money is legally accepted across the country and government has authorized that piece of paper legally. Legally it is being authorized by the government of India. That's why it is legal tender, legally accepted. Fiat money because it is having the backing, the guarantee of the government. So it is many a times it is also said to be the sovereign backing, right? Like when I was discussing treasury, so treasury was basically sovereign debt, right? So this government, this currency is, this is piece of paper. If the government is not, for example, if you see old thousand notes, right? They are merely piece of paper right now because government had removed its backing from that note, right? So second characteristic, it has no or negligible intrinsic value. That means if you see that piece of paper, 2000 rupees piece of paper, if you talk about its intrinsic value, it might be, for example, 10 rupees or 20 rupees, right? That means the absolute value and intrinsic value of these currency differs, right? So the coins are also fiat money in the sense that if you take their metallic value, then it is comparatively less in comparison to the value it is holding. So the currency as well as the coins are fiat money, right? This we can leave. It's nothing important. You can go through it. Then coming to legal tender, right? Legal tender is the money that is recognized by the law of the land. I already explained. It must be accepted for discharge of debt, right? RBI Act of 1934, which gives the central bank the sole right to issue bank notes, states that every bank note shall be legal tender. That means it is legally accepted at any place in India in payment for the amount expressed therein. It can be limited or unlimited. That is important to understand. Limited means that if you want to transact certain amount, so can you use currency that is coin as well as the paper currency for the transaction? If any amount of transaction can be done by using any mode of currency or coin, that means it will be unlimited. So if you see the example, you will find that if you want to transact, if you want to carry out transaction of any limit, unlimited, then you can use only paper currency. It's not like that you want to transact 10 lakh rupees or you want to purchase something of 10 lakh rupees, then you cannot give a person it in the form of coins because it is limited, right? You can only use this amount for a limited and it's probably 1000 rupees. Currency notes are unlimited. Legal tender and can be offered as payment for dues of any size. Checks or instruments like commercial bills and virtual currency can't be used as legal tender money. See, you have to focus on these checks. Checks is not a legal tender. Keep it in your mind because checks can't be guaranteed by the Reserve Bank of India. If you see any note, any currency note, you'll find that there is a guarantee on the note that I guarantee the bearer of this currency to pay such and such of currency. But there is no such guarantee on check, right? So because why the Reserve Bank of India should give the guarantee for the check? Because check is basically the property of the individual. So checks are not the legal tender. When the government withdraws legal tender status to a currency denomination, it cannot be used for settling transactions. This case happens in case of demonetization. So if you talk about currency in circulation, first we'll start with this legal definition. So this definition is basically in your NCRT, and you have to go through it because questions are directly coming from this. Money supply, like money demand, is a stock variable. The total stock of money in circulation among the public at a particular point of time is called money supply. And these are the four alternative measures of money supply given by RBI. First is M1. And M1 is basically the currency which is telling you the most liquidity. That means it is the currency, CU is currency available with you, with the people. Right? The cash with the people. CU is cash with the people. Currency held by the public. And DD is demand deposit. When we were discussing the liability NDTL, then we discussed demand liabilities. So DD is nothing but these are the demand deposits by the people with the bank. Right? So these two things are the most liquid things in the economy. They are available as per your demand. As and when you require the money, you can have it because currency is with you and DD is available on demand. Then comes M2. This is the second measure of currency in the economy or liquidity in the economy. It is M1. M1 that is defined this one. Plus saving deposits with post office saving banks. Uh, why the saving deposit with post office saving banks are put in M2 and not with M1? Any idea? Do you know the difference the liquidity aspect of the deposits in the saving? You can tell me who is she? Please, I think somebody raised hand. Anybody who was raising hand can ask me the question. Okay. So will anybody reply it? That why we are not putting this saving deposit with M1? No idea. Okay.
It is not either the direct liquidity or it is not related to like banks or RBI, which can be changed into liquidity.
See, if you see the type of nature of liquidity of your deposits in the post office. If you have visited post office, it's basically a conservative system, right? If you have deposited, it's unlike the banks. If you have deposited your money with the bank, then it is available 24 into sort of in the present times. But in case of post office, if you have deposited your that 50 lakh rupees or something, then you cannot go at one go and ask the post office to give you 50 lakhs at once, right? Secondly, the deposits in the post office are 100% backed by the government of India. That money, when I think we will be discussing it in when we will be discussing that part बैंकिंग सॉरी बैंकिंग नहीं ये जो जब आपका बजट वाला पोर्शन मैं विल बी डिस्कसिंग देन आई विल बी टेलिंग यू that this deposits with the post office are basically borrowed by the government of India. All the deposits which you are putting deposits in the post office savings, they are put in the special fund, national small saving fund, and that is basically part of I think your that public accounts, right? So the money deposited with post office savings are the most safest money, but it is not liquid in comparison to your liquidity of money in the banks, because the money deposits in the banks are liquid, highly liquid. They are available every time, while the money with the post offices is not so liquid. Right? Then comes your M3. M3 is nothing but it is including your M1 plus net time deposits of commercial banks. This you have to keep it. This is not M2. This is only M1, right? And M4 is M3 plus total deposits with post office saving organization, excluding NSC. Keep it in mind that it does not includes NSC, National Saving Certificate. National Saving Certificate is not including M4 because you cannot realize or take money out of NSC until and unless the time is the time is over. Secondly, this NSC is directly going to the government, right? So we did not include it as a part of liquidity because in any sense it is not part of the liquidity for that time being. Unlike other things, like if you are depositing money with commercial bank, then you can, in case of any uh, emergency, you can have it back. But in case of NSC, this is logged for that time period. So NSC are never included as a part of M4. Now, the questions which UPSC many times ask is, if you see the volume of money, right? Volume of money, you'll find that in volume terms, M1, M2, M3, and M4 in volume terms, right? So M3 and M4 are said to be broad money, while M1 and M2 are said to be narrow money. This is volume terms, right? And if you talk about liquidity, then you will realize that this M1 is the highly liquid. It is available all the time, highly liquid. While if you talk about this M4, you will realize that this is the least liquid, right? This is the least liquid. And if you see this term M3, this M3, this is M1, that is currency with you and demand deposit with banks, plus net time deposits of commercial banks. This is the most commonly measure of money supply, because a common man, normally a common man is interacting with this M3 on a day-to-day basis. Because I told you that you rarely go to post office. Once in a while, you know that if I am depositing money with the post office, then I am putting it as a uh, for the future purpose, something that is very conservative part. I have deposited it and I forget it, right? After a particular point of time only, I'll be going to the bank, post office, and withdraw that money. So the M3 is most popular and most commonly used of money supply, right? So that's why it is said to be aggregate monetary resources, aggregate monetary resources, this thing. And this question was asked in UPSC. Right? So out of this questions are coming, right? Whether they can ask you what is narrow money, broad money, arrange in the liquidity form, aggregate monetary resources, right? So, and one thing more, that you have to follow only these figures, because in many places you will find n number of figures, so you have not to follow that. Then comes, there is a concept of uh, reserve money and currency in circulation. So currency in circulation is nothing but it is the amount which is with the public and cash in hands with banks. That means demand deposit. That is the money which can be said to be currency in currency in circulation. Now, another term is reserve money. See, reserve money is basically the money which is in totality in the economy, and it includes that money. When we were discussing monetary policy, then we talked about CRR, we talked about SLR, right? We discussed all those things. We were saying that many times the bank can need money, and might be anytime it can park money with the Reserve Bank of India. So reserve money is telling you the total money with the Central Bank of India or Central Bank of India can infuse that amount of money, right? So it is currency in circulation plus deposit of commercial banks with RBI, right? It is also called central bank money, monetary base money, high powered money, and sometimes narrow money. Reserve money equals currency in circulation plus bankers deposit with RBI and other deposits with RBI. It is the base level for the money supply or the high powered component of the money supply. That means this money is that money which is acting as a monetary base, this thing, monetary base for the economy, right? And Reserve Bank of India can use out of this money as per the situation demands. So this is reserve money, right? Then one concept is money multiplier. This is an important concept to understand. Money multiplier is nothing, but I think I have discussed with you the concept of Adam Smith, who says that money should be in circulation. If the money is in circulation, then the economy is in momentum, right? So how it functions, how you will come to know that the money is in the circulation. So the example is, for example, if in this example, what is happening, that this person has put 100 rupees with PNB, right? Now, what happens when this is basically the liability on the bank, 100 rupees liability on the bank. Now, what happens? This PNB put 10 rupees in the form of reserves, right? Either CRR, and it's just an example to understand. And what he did, he gave 90 rupees in the form of loans. Now, what happens? The person who took 90 rupees as loan, then what he did with it, he again put that money in another bank, right? For example, he put it in SBI. Then out of that 90 rupees, SBI put again 10%, while 81 rupees were again given in the form of loans. Then this process continues, right? That means this 100 rupees deposited by this person created how much of money in the economy, right? He did some activity of 100 rupees by depositing it in the bank. Again, this 90 was given in the was given loan to somebody else, right? Again, this 81 rupees was given loan. Again, this something 72 rupees will be given in the, and it continues. That means 100 rupees deposited by this person created so much of liquidity in the economy, and this process goes on and on and on. So this is basically money multiplier. That means the more and more the currency is changing the hands, the more it is getting multiplied, right? So the multiple in which the banking system can expand deposits received in the form of base money into broad money is called money multiplier. That means the ratio of this money, right, to the final money created in the economy. In the financial system, bank can enhance money supply by expanding loans in comparison and deposit they receive. The deposit received by commercial banks are part of base money. Here, the banking system as a whole can create additional money impact through deposit acceptance and loan dispersal. More and more loans are given in the economy, more and more money is getting multiplied. It is expressed as a ratio between broad money and base money. Broad money means the final money created by the money infused at the starting, which is called the base money. Right? So this is money multiplier. That means how your the more the money multiplier, the more is momentum in the economy. Right. So this is a short chapter, and the questions are limited. Right, you have just to go through NCRT for this, nothing else, and they are limited concepts, and most prominently the concept of that M1, M2, M3, M3, M4. Money multiplier can be asked, right? You should be clear with the concept of reserve money, right? Legal tender, fiat money. Limited definitions are there, right? And you can find questions on it. Questions आते हैं यहाँ से. Any query? Please explain broad money and base money. See, broad money in the reference of this money multiplier, when that person deposited money, when that person deposited 100 rupee with the Punjab National Bank, right, that money act as a base money, right? Because we want we consider everything's status in status quo, then we will analyze the effect of that 100 rupee in the economy. Then we saw that that 100 money was put in the Punjab National Bank. Then Punjab National Bank further give it to another investor, right? By keeping 10% in the form of reserve. Then further that money was taken by another investor, and that investor finally put again it into the another bank. And that then this process goes on and on and on. See, that part of basically you might get confused that why that money is going to the bank. Basically, the idea is if you take 100 if you take 90 rupees from the bank, what will you do with that money? Basically you will be using that money into the economy, and the person from whom you purchase something, he will finally put it into the bank. So we are assuming that that money is basically becoming a part of the formal economy, right? It's not only bank, but it's a part of formal economy. So base money is the initial money injected into the economy, and broad money means the final impact of that money on the economy, how much money it has created in the economy by changing the hands, right? That means higher the economic activity in the economy, higher the broad money created by the base injection of the base money. As I was going through MCQ fiscal policies, I have found this out. I didn't understand what margin stabilization scheme, rotation of credit versus margin. See, marginal stabilization scheme, marginal or market stabilization scheme, rotation of credit versus uh, okay, I'll come to you one to one market stabilization scheme, market rotation of credit versus marginal standing facility. Okay, accommodative stand. See, accommodative stand is nothing but just to accommodate the situation, right? These are monitor. I'll come back to you for this, right? Any other question?
No, sir.
Next is we'll be going through banking part. If we talk about banking, so banking is basically moving the economic wheel. And as I has already told you that banking sector is nothing but it's a channel who is channelizing the depositors' money to the investors, right? So it is actually acting as a broker, nothing else. And technically, we give it a term financial intermediary, right? And all these financial intermediaries are said to be all India financial institutions, AIFI. And broadly, if we divide them, then they can be classified as developmental banks, and another is commercial banks. So commercial banks are all those banks which you came across on a day-to-day basis, right? For example, ICICI, SBI, UCO, IOB, right? And developmental banks, if you see the structure of all these banks, these are like Exim Bank, Industrial Development Bank, Housing Development Bank, Agriculture Development Bank. All these banks are first related to a particular sector, sector specific. Secondly, these are related to all those sectors which are promoting growth in the particular sector in the economy, right? So sector specific banks are there, and they are promoting basically growth in the economy by promoting these particular sectors, right? So if you see scheduled, and these commercial banks are nothing but the banks which are basically catering to the needs of the common man, and they're further classified as scheduled and non-scheduled banks. The definition of scheduled and non-scheduled banks is simple. Normally, you will find whatever you banks you find in the general parlance, they are basically scheduled banks. And technically, definition is they are basically following the guidelines mentioned in RBI Act 1934, Schedule 2, right? Nothing else. So we will be discussing all these in detail. So if we talk about developmental banks, these are financial institutions whose primary objective is to growth and development of social and economic sectors, which finally results in the growth of the nation. See, initially what was happening in UPSC, that the UPSC was asking questions based upon the composition uh, in these banks, that who was the owner of these banks, right? For example, what is the stack of the government of India? What is the stack of the Reserve Bank of India? But right now it is such questions are not coming in UPSC. So regarding developmental banks, yes, you should know that what is the relevance of these banks. So if we talk about Exim Bank, it is involved in the cross-border trade and investment, and is wholly owned by Government of India. Export import, as the name suggests, it is promoting the trade and investment. Industrial Development Bank, again, as the name suggests, that it is basically promoting the industries in India, and it comprises of IFCI and IDBI and SIDBI. From UPSC point of view, this is important. I'll tell you why it is important. IDBI provided financial assistance both in rupee and foreign currencies for greenfield projects. Government shareholding is less than 50%. IFCI, it caters to the long-term finance needs of the industrial sector. Right? So IDBI is basically promoting mainly the greenfield projects, and IFCI is giving you the loans. And if you talk about ICICI Bank, initially it was also an industrial bank, industrial development bank, but later on it was converted into commercial bank. Then comes SIDBI. It is basically Small Industries Development Bank of India, and it is the principal financial institution for promotion, financing, and development of MSMEs, micro, small, and medium enterprise, and for coordination of the functions of institutes engaged in similar activities. Why it is important? Because this Mudra Bank is the most contemporary idea of the Government of India. It is basically related to the SIDBI. We'll discuss it. Mudra. This is important from UPSC point of view. Micro Units Development and Refinance Agency Bank. It is basically providing loans at low rates to microfinance institutions. What are microfinance institutions? Anybody? What are microfinance institutions? which finances MSMEs in small amounts less than 1 crore. So, okay. Microfinance institutions are very much popular in your area, and I think there was see, if you talk about, if you go by the literal meaning of term micro, that means very small. Finance institution means which is financing the small, which is contributing to the small finances, right?
That provides a small scale financial service in the form of loan, credit, or savings.
Right. So if you in your I think Andhra region, SKS Microfinance Company was there, right, and that became very popular. Later on, it was also registered with SEBI, and later on there was some scam and all those things. So. Basically, microfinance, and the most popular name in microfinance is Yunus Khan of Bangladesh. Are you aware of Yunus Khan? Google him. He's basically got the Nobel Prize for Peace and way back. And the promotion of microfinance institutions in Bangladesh was one of the reason that led to women empowerment. In Bangladesh. Yes, and secondly, it is also one of the reason that Bangladesh could do well in case of trade. And recently, if you have gone through these figures of per capita income, Bangladesh has done far better than India. Right? So microfinance institutions are one of the responsible reason for that. So what microfinance institutions did, uh, these basically caters to the demands of the marginalized section of the society, poor people. For example, the people who are earning 300 rupees, 400 rupees a day. Right? Now imagine what this institute is doing, that if you are earning 300, 400 a day, and secondly, you are not having access to financial institutions in your area, right? Your villages are not having the banks, so that is another an issue. So this, and you cannot go to the banks which are in the towns on a day-to-day basis. What these finance institutions are doing, these finance institutions are collecting these micro rupees, 300, 400 on a day-to-day basis. And this, for example, there is a village of 1,000 people, 1,000 families. Then if every family is depositing 300 on a day basis, then it comes out to be 3 lakh, right? 3 lakhs rupees a day. And it comes out to be 90 lakhs a month. This 90 lakhs a month is the result of these 300 rupees per family. That means this sort of money is available to any investor of that area. Forget about 1,000. If it is 100 family itself, then it will be 9 lakhs rupees per month, right? That means this 9 lakh money, 9 lakh liquidity is available to the any investor of that village, right? So microfinance, and secondly, they are giving an arrangement, as they are providing a system to having savings, right? So this small savings are only possible because this institution is there in the region. So Mudra is basically providing low rate loans to the microfinance institution and non-banking financial institutions. What are NBFCs, non-banking financial institutions? Any idea? Any idea about NBFCs? Any example? No, see, NBFC is basically non-banking. That means it is quasi-banking. It has certain characteristics of the bank, and it does not have all the characteristics of the banks. So for example, the major difference between the NBFC, yes, Suman, Muthoot, the best example to understand Muthoot Gold Finance, right? So you will find that these non-banking financial institutions are having
It does not have the full banking license.
uh, the Does not have a full bank license. Yes, it is bank in the sense that it is allowing you to deposit the money or giving you the money in the form of loans, right? But the major characteristic of this NBFC which differs it from bank is that it does not issues checkbooks to you. It cannot issue checkbooks. Right? This is the major difference, right? So depending upon the specific area in which they are working, NBFCs are defined. For example, if you talk about Muthoot, they're very specifically in the gold loans. If you talk about LIC Housing Finance, they are promoting housing loans in the housing finance companies. If you talk about Bajaj Finance Company, you will find that if you are going to purchase mobile phone from the shop, then they are giving you free finance to the mobile phones. So these are the functions of these NBFCs depending upon their specific sector in which they are working, right? Then Mudra has been initially formed as a wholly owned subsidiary of Small Industries Bank. This is important thing. Why I was saying that SIDBI is important, because initially Mudra has been a part of SIDBI and later on it will be a separate company. And the bank will classify its clients into three categories under Pradhan Mantri Mudra Yojana scheme: Shishu, Kishore, Tarun. Right? इसको please remind it, because UPSC can ask question on this Mudra part because it has been untouched till now. Then comes NHB, National Housing Bank, and it's a principal agency to promote housing finance institutions both at local and regional levels, and to provide financial and other support incidental to such institutions and for matters connected therewith. Government has 100% stake in it. NABARD. This is important from the UPSC point of view, and UPSC can normally ask questions from NABARD. Basically, NABARD is the National Bank for Agriculture and Rural Development, and it is the bank which is looking after the development of the rural area and the industries in the rural area like cottage, small industry, and village industry, and other rural industries. Right? It coordinates the rural financing activities of all institutions engaged in development work at the field level. It refinances and regulates the financial institution which finances the rural sector. What is the difference between financing and refinancing? Any idea? Financing and refinancing. When I'm using the term refinancing, what does it mean? Anyone? Basically, refinancing means, for example, there is a bank. Mm, no, this is not the idea of the. No, Bhaskar, I just, okay, no issues. See, financing and refinancing means, for example, you are going to State Bank of India, right? You are going to State Bank of India, and or is not any rural bank. There are certain rural banks. So you went to any rural bank, and that rural bank is basically giving loans to the promotion of infrastructure in rural area, rural infrastructure. Now, if you are taking loan directly from this rural bank, for example, this is uh, Telangana Rural Bank. So it will be financing directly the project. So it is, this process is financing. Now, if compensating, NABARD is compensating this bank, right? That means it will be a process of refinancing. Yes, Umang, absolutely right. Umang is absolutely right. That means this process of financing of this Telangana Rural Bank by NABARD is basically refinancing, while this bank is financing this project, right? So refinancing is nothing but refilling the bank. Now comes the question that from where does NABARD get its funds from? This is a crucial question. Right? So if you have known one term, there is a term priority sector lending, PSL. Priority. Anybody who is having the idea of PSL, priority sector lending?
Yes, sir.
बताइए.
Sir, as the name suggests, there are certain sectors which are prioritized by the government, to whom a certain percentage of loan is must. And in case if the percent amount of loan is not given to the targeted audience, it went to NABARD.
Very good. She has summarized the thing. Basically, what happens that to promote particular sectors which are either neglected or which are either not preferred by the banks to be uh, for loans purposes, and those sectors are basically catering to the marginalized section of the society, or these sectors are catering to the max and the and these sectors are basically the sectors which are directly having an impact on the poor people, rural people, or the development of the country. So these sectors are given priority by the government, in the sense that government says to the banks that when you are giving loans, if you have given 100 rupees of loans in the economy, then you have to keep it in mind that out of 100 rupees you have to give 40 rupees, for example, to these priority sector. And these priority sectors are defined by the government of India. For example, agriculture, education, environment, and this housing, small housing, right? So all these are part of your priority sector lending. Now comes the question that if you, for example, this is State Bank of India, and State Bank of India was supposed to give, for example, 40 crore rupees to priority sector lending. Now what happened that State Bank of India could only give 30 crore rupees to PSL. Now the government of India has a provision that if you haven't given 40 crore, then we will penalize you. Now what is the option left before this State Bank of India? This State Bank of India will give this 10 crore, the shortfall, that is 10 crore, to the NABARD. And NABARD is having a fund that is RIDF, right? Rural Infrastructure Development Fund. And this 10 crore will be put with this RIDF. That means this SBI will not be penalized because it has put that shortfall with RIDF. Now, the trend is the banks prefer to deposit more and more of their money into RIDF. Can anybody give me the reason why? Why banks prefer to channelize their PSL shortfall to RIDF rather than preferring to give loans to the PSL? थोड़ा सा लॉजिकल है. Anyone? Repeat. The question is that it has been observed that the commercial banks are giving or depositing money in the RIDF rather than giving it to the PSL sectors, right? Rather than giving it to the people in the PSL sectors, they are preferring to put money with RIDF. See, the issue is, so do they get? Yes, Umang, because the career is becoming difficult from banks. Okay. Umang, you are right. See, the most important point is that RIDF, when the banks are putting money with the RIDF, they are getting some sort of money in return in the form of interest, right? So first thing is, secondly, this is basically guaranteed by the government of India. That means repayment to senior. Okay, yes, you all of you are right. The money given to the PSL has a probability of getting converted into NPA. First, second, the money put in the RIDF has no chance of converted into NPA. First thing. Secondly, it is having sovereign backing. Third, it is giving them a fixed return on their asset. So this is the reason why banks prefer to have money in RIDF rather than giving in the form of this PSL, right? So I think it's clear. This is very important to understand. So the fund is maintained by NABARD, and domestic commercial banks contribute to the fund to the extent of their shortfall stipulated priority sector lending to agriculture, right? So this is how NABARD is. And after it, if we talk about commercial banks are again of two types. So it is it has to follow, the banks has to follow second schedule of RBI Act 1934, and this is basically old definition, but it is mentioned in the second schedule. But now these commercial banks has to follow the terms and conditions which are defined by RBI from time to time. So it says that paid up capital and reserve for an aggregate value should be at least rupees 5 lakhs. Function of bank should not be detrimental to the interest of its depositors. It must be a corporation and not a partnership. Right. So public sector banks are nothing but all the banks in which government of India is having more than 50% of the stack. Right. Nationalized banks are those banks which were acquired by the government of India under a special act, that is Nationalization Act, and it was done in 1969 and 1980s. And both of the times Indira Gandhi was the prime minister, and secondly, all this nationalization was done through an ordinance, right? And it was done twice, 1969, 1980s. And technically, if you talk technically, then all the nationalized banks are public sector banks, because in all the nationalized banks, government of India is having a stake more than 50%. SBI is having a unique case, and that we'll discuss tomorrow, right? So till now we have only understood the concept of development bank and idea of the commercial banking. Tomorrow we'll be understanding the evolution of the banking, what is the current status of the banking, right? Like what is the idea behind the payment bank, wholesale bank, universal banking, and number of concepts are there in the banking sector, right? And that's all for today. Any question? Any query?
Clear, sir.
Okay, right. So Bhaskar, please ping me on Telegram and put your question over there, right? Do banks get any interest if they keep money with NABARD? Yes, they actually NABARD, when they're putting money with NABARD, it's a sort of NABARD is taking borrowing money from them, right? But the rates are comparatively less. For example, if they are giving loans to any if you are going to the bank and asking for loan, it might give you loan at the rate of 7%, 8%. But in case of NABARD, it will only be, for example, 4 to 5. But the best part is that this they will be getting the income on it, and that will be backed by the government of India. And that means it will be a sort of sovereign debt. While if the bank is giving money to somebody in the farming, it might be converted into NP. And secondly, the bank has operational cost in the agricultural loans. They have to hire people to approach the farmers in case they are not paying back the money. While in case of NABARD, there is no such issues. I hope it is clear. Right. So tomorrow